All right, so we're going to do a short video on viruses today. So what is a virus? A virus is a microscopic, aka you need to see it with a microscope or something that's even stronger than a microscope, like an electron microscope. And it is technically like a parasite, which can infect living organisms and cause diseases. So examples are like flu, the cold, right? And right now, our favorite thing right now, COVID-19 causing the pandemic. It can make copies of itself inside another organism cell. So it can't actually do it by itself. It needs the other cells. Viruses consist of a nucleic acid and a protein coat. So the nucleic acid is a genetic material. It can either be made out of RNA or can be made out of DNA. So like I just said, viruses cannot reproduce on their own. So they need to use a cell. They need to use a living organism to do reproduction. So like I said earlier, it's not itself really a living organism because it can't reproduce. And so it uses a host, because it doesn't have machinery inside of it, like ribosomes to make proteins and things like that to make its own structure. So it's gotta, be a parasite and siphon off of another organism's ability to do so. So viruses cannot metabolize energy. They gotta suck energy from the host. And so since they don't do cellular respiration and don't process their own energy, they're not really alive. It's pretty straightforward, right? Because all living things need energy, so they intake energy. They either make it or they, break it down from consuming it. And so, like I just keep saying over and over, viruses are not considered biotic. They are not considered living. So the reason why I keep saying that is because here are some characteristics of living organisms. So if you look at the circle on the left side, the pie chart, you see that living organisms take in nutrients. So they're either producers or consumers. They either make their own food or they consume food. Living things grow, living things produce waste, living things use energy in order to grow and move and repair things that are damaged. Living things also reproduce by themselves using their own bodies. And then living things also respond to their environment. And so viruses don't do most of these things. That's why we can't consider them as living. So a virus is basically a very, very simple structure. And these pictures might look kind of complex, but they aren't. So a virus is basically just genetic material, either RNA or DNA, and it's covered by a protein coat. And that protein coat can be made up of different kinds of protein, but it's basically just, to protect the DNA. You don't want to damage your DNA, right? Viruses are the same way. They infect a host cell to reproduce. If you see this diagram right here, there's a protein coat around this bacteriophage. There's a tail and fibers, so it can get kind of complex, but there's also simple cylinder-shaped ones or simple sphere-shaped ones, and you can see there's a cutout right here that shows the DNA hidden inside of that protein coat. The rhinovirus is actually what causes the cold. The tobacco mosaic virus actually infects tobacco, which cigarettes are made out of, and influenza right here is a tetrahedral shape, and you can see the cutout right here where the DNA is inside, and influenza is obviously the flu. A bacteriophage is literally the Greek name for bacteria eater. So it eats bacteria, okay? It doesn't, it's not a kind of bacteria, it only infects bacteria. So most scientists consider viruses to be non-living because viruses need to take over cell machinery to reproduce. They can't do it on their own. And viruses are dormant, so they don't actually do any life functions until they enter the cell and they're like, woo, we're gonna reproduce now. So like I said before, bacteriophage, phage means to devour. So bacteriophage means devourer of bacteria. So these specific shaped ones are like the ones that you see in sci-fi films and movies, but they're the ones that specifically attack bacteria. And so the capsid is the name of the protein coat. So capsid is a capsule or an outside container. You ever do those slots machine things where you put in the quarter and you spin it and a capsule comes out? That thing that you pop open is a capsule. So these viruses have a capsule on the top. And inside of that capsule, when you pop it open, would just be DNA or RNA, which is the genetic information. And its only job, the capsid's only job is to protect. And like I said, genetic information is either DNA or RNA, and it's inside. So this was a picture, like a real life picture using an electron microscope, which is thousands of times stronger than a regular microscope because viruses are really, 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 really tiny. They're so tiny that they're like hundredths or thousandths of the size of a regular cell. So they're like 1/100th, or 1/1000th of the size of a regular cell. They're tiny, tiny. They're really hard to see even under a regular microscope, if you can. For some viruses, the capsid is also surrounded by lipids, which are fats. And they are fusing to hosts when they enter the cells of the host. And that lipid layer is called an envelope. It helps them sneak into the cells without being noticed. So then there's no alarm system going off in the cell, and then the immune system is not going to come and attack that cell or attack that part of the virus inside of the cell because it slipped in using the envelope and it got unnoticed. There are a bunch of shapes. As you can see, there's a polyhedral shape, like I said, it's got a lot of triangular faces. There's a sphere like a ball. There's a complex like the bacteriophage, right? It looks like a mini robot. And there's the helical, which is like a little tube or a cylinder. So viruses versus cellular life, we don't consider viruses life or living things, so that's why we separated them. If you look, viruses can have DNA or RNA as their genetic material. They need a host to replicate. They never contain organelles inside because they don't have cells. They don't convert energy and they don't grow. Cellular life has a cell membrane, and viruses have an envelope, but that's different from the cell membrane. Cellular life only has DNA as the genetic material. It can reproduce independently. Eukaryotes contain organelles, and cellular life converts energy to perform tasks. So you should be able to answer all the questions using this video, and you can pause and rewind to whatever part you need to in order to finish that.